It took just 1.5 years to reverse almost all of my issues. See, your biology is stronger than your willpower. I was preparing for one scientific expedition to Antarctica, and the doctor just very bluntly and rudely just told me that if I want to see my 30th birthday, I need to lose 30 kilo. If you can decrease your calorie intake and increase your calorie output or utilization, you will reduce your weight. We believe that salt is a bad thing for hypertension, but in reality, sugar might be the real reason for high blood pressure.
Hi, my name is Preetpal, and I want to talk to you about human health today. As we know, human health is a confluence of many different things: sleep, stress, activity, nutrition, etc. So today we have the pleasure of having Dr. Biswas on our podcast, and he will take his time to explain to us his journey around health and the learnings he had so far. Dr. Biswas, welcome to the show. Would you
Thank
take
you.
a few seconds and introduce yourself to the audience?
Yeah, thank you for having me here. So I'm Dr. Biswas, and I've spent most of my life struggling with different health conditions. So by training, I'm a biologist, more specifically a molecular microbiologist, and I did my research starting from pollen grains and permafrost soil in Antarctica. And so basically, I'm a curious scientist and I'm fascinated by everything that is alive. So that's who I am.
Oh, that's pretty fascinating, right? So, you know, I personally have a belief that human health cannot be compartmentalized. It cannot be reduced to a component, but it is a sum total of many different things, right? So we'll have a fantastic time on this podcast
Sure.
discussing
Yeah.
learnings about the whole thing.
hmm
So thank you for being here. So, Dr. Biswas, explain to us how did this whole interest of yours start? What made you come here?
Right. So I just wasn't able to recover my health at all, even after following all the standard guidelines and suggestions. So I would say most of my life, my entire life, I've struggled with obesity. And later on, along with obesity, a lot of different complexities also started emerging. Diabetes, insomnia, anxiety, depression, constipation, high blood pressure. And what occurred to me that even if I follow everything that I was asked of, still I'm not getting any better. And there were three incidences that actually triggered me to take action. Uh, so one of that is actually I was traveling back from Frankfurt to Delhi, and that was the first time I had to use seatbelt extension. And I realized that that was 2016. So even after doing everything, still I'm not improving at all. And if a treatment regimen is good enough, then that indicator should be that you don't have to start from taking one pill to three to four. So that's not how a good treatment should look like. And it's not about discipline because I I kind of take pride in that I am disciplined, and that was one of the incidents. So another before that, before 2016, it was in 2008, and at that time, I was preparing for one scientific expedition to Antarctica. So it was Delhi Ames, and the doctor just very bluntly and rudely just told me that if I want to see my 30th birthday, I need to lose 30 kilo. But he had no new idea like how to go about that. And the last incident that actually pushed me to take action, uh, right after COVID, I was trying to get a term insurance, a life insurance policy for my family. And my application was denied. So my health condition was so bad, that I wasn't able to get a term insurance policy for myself. So that was the final point when I had to implement. So I started asking questions in 2008. I sought for advice and guidance. I implemented everything. 2016, even after following from 2008 to 2016, I still had no good result. And then from 16 to right about COVID, like 2020, that time, the policy was rejected. So between 2016 and 2021, I learned a lot of different insights and ideas, but I wasn't implementing them. I was too scared because those ideas are quite contrarian. But after that policy was rejected, I had no option, I had to implement. And somehow, fortunately or unfortunately, my whole training and background is in biological sciences. Although I have studied most of my life like microbes, bacteria, fungus, virus, DNA, RNA, I have never studied human as such. After that seatbelt incidents of 2016, I started learning about human biology, and I went through a lot of different disciplines, like starting from paleoanthropology, paleoforensic anthropology, uh, to even cutting edge research on cancer biology. So there are a lot of different things uh, that pointed me to certain areas of research, and when I started implementing them, it took just 1.5 years to reverse almost all of my issues. So I was struggling with a lot of different health complications, and I had to take control of my own health. So I had to regain the ownership and responsibility of my own health. And fortunately, my training actually helped me to do that. And yes, I was able to reverse all of my health conditions. Yeah.
Fantastic. So that brought you here. So the key takeaway is 18 months and a little bit of persistence, no discipline, no invoking the superpowers, correct?
See, your biology is stronger than your willpower. And this calorie in, calorie out theory that doesn't work because the assumptions behind those theories are completely wrong. We can discuss it later also, not a problem. But willpower is always lesser than your biology. Your biology will dictate. You cannot overpower your biology just by sheer willpower. That will not happen.
Yep. So, Dr. Biswas, you just finished talking about the expo zone. Uh, so, I want to pull your attention to the other topic which you mentioned a few seconds ago, is around the great conflict. Essentially, what you were implying there were that some of the evidences which are found are weak, but very strong recommendations are made on it, right?
Mhm.
Can you talk about some of this with examples to showcase around health?
Yeah, sure. Uh, let's start with the most common and most talked about advice, or the theory like calorie in, calorie out. And we think that it is so simple, and we believe it to be true. Because it is so simple and so intuitive that we do not even question whether this theory is true or not. But the problem is, this for this theory to be true, there are many assumptions that must be true. Otherwise, this theory will not work. And I will try to prove you at least couple of those assumptions are wrong. And for the theory to be invalid, even if one assumption is incorrect, then it's not going to work. So we say it like this: if you can decrease your calorie intake and increase your calorie output or utilization, you will reduce your weight. So that is basically eat less, move more to reduce weight. Now, what that there are some built into assumptions. Our first assumption: calorie in is independent of calorie out. So what it means, however we change the calorie in, it's not going to impact the calorie out. These are independent. That's what must be true. in order to have this equation in a working condition. So now we'll try to answer this. Is it really true or not, this assumption? Uh, there are studies as early as I think 1919 or 1917 in Carnegie Institute in Washington. They did a study similar to this. Like they tried to reduce the calorie intake and they wanted to see what happened to the participants. And you can calculate based on number of calories what should be the result as a weight loss. So what they did, they fed a group low calorie diet, reducing their calorie intake. They calculated how much weight reduction should be there and they followed the group. So whatever the mathematics predicted by the same formula, calorie in, calorie out, it wasn't there in the result. Not only that, they try to measure the calorie out part, but they are not controlling the calorie out part. So they are just controlling the calorie in part. So what happened? By reducing the calorie intake, their basal metabolic rate is also reduced. And that was more evident in a study called, it's a famous study called Minnesota Starvation Experiment in 1950s, where they actually found a reduction of 30% of your calorie intake will result in 30% reduction of your BMR, your basal metabolic rate. So BMR means like everything that happens to keep us alive, that is our BMR. Basically, uh, total expenditure, you can exclude the exercise part. So other than that, everything is BMR. And
Right.
in reality, if we consider the entire calorie expenditure, exercise is practically only about 5%, not more than that. Your BMR is actually the 95%.
Correct.
So what happens when you reduce your calorie? Your BMR will drop down, and this drop is almost immediate. And even if you increase your calorie later, your BMR will stay low for long enough. So that is why when you stop, or go back to your regular normal calorie intake, you won't just gain the weight, you will gain it faster than you dropped it, and sometimes you will even gain more than you lost it. So first assumption that calorie in and calorie out, they're independent. It's not, because when you lower the calorie in, your calorie out or the BMR, basal metabolic, it will also come down. So they are not independent. The first assumption is wrong. That is good enough to reject the whole theory. But again, let's talk about uh, maybe a second one, that our fat storage is unregulated. So what I mean by that, if you have enough nutrient, your body can turn it into fat. That's what I mean by unregulated. But in reality, if you try to grow adipocytes in petri plate, and if you give them enough nutrients, still it won't be efficient in accumulating fat until you have insulin in the mix. So like every other function of our body, let's say height or any function, everything in biology is regulated. So our tendency of either gaining or losing fat is also regulated. And it's not just about insulin. There are many more players in this, managing this part of the equation, like leptin. So leptin is a hormone that gives you the feeling of full. So if that hormone is not working properly, even if you are full, you will still feel the hunger. Then we have another hormone called ghrelin. So ghrelin is supposed to make you hungry. So when you eat, the ghrelin level should come down. But if it is dysregulated, then again you will overeat. So leptin, ghrelin, cortisol, another hormone. Insulin is obviously there. So all these hormones, they will influence the equation. So it's not unregulated. So fat deposition, whatever calorie balance you have extra will deposit into fat. It's not like that. It's not. There are so many other functions of your body, whole metabolism, everything will actually use energy. And uh, so second assumption, that whatever excess calorie you have will turn into fat. That means unregulated. It's not. So fat accumulation is a regulated process. So that's second, how to say, assumption that must be true for the calorie in, calorie out theory to work. Not only that, people often revoke the theory of, the laws of thermodynamics, the first law of thermodynamics, conservation of energy. What they fail to understand, that when we talk about thermodynamics, we are talking about a closed, isolated system. But human body is not an isolated, system.
Right.
So uh, we are having food, that's an input from external side. We are, uh, have our excretions, that's an output of our side. We're taking in, breathing in air and oxygen. We're breathing out carbon dioxide. So we're giving out heat. So it's not a closed system. Human body is not a closed system. So that's another assumption that must be true for that whole theory to work. It's there are so many assumptions, I mean, that is built into this particular theory of calorie in, calorie out, and all these assumptions are not true. So if the assumptions themselves are incorrect, on which we're building the theory of calorie in, calorie out, it's not going to work. That's from the
Yeah.
theoretical point of view. But not just that, I have lived it, and I'm sure a lot of people actually have lived it, and they went into this vicious cycle. So what happens? You eat less and you move more. So you, let's say you uh, control your portion size or something. You eat less, you stay hungry, and you spend some hours in the gym, right? And you are able to bring down your weight couple of kilos or something. But while doing that, your basal metabolic rate is also getting lowered. So the same amount of calorie cutting and same amount of exercise is not going to give you any more result. It's like a bank balance. So if you are earning less, you are not going to spend more. You are also going to control your spending. Same is true for the calories. So body it wants to be in a homeostasis, and we all have a set body weight, like a thermostat situation. And that thermostat is set by all those hormones. That is our internal exposome, kind of, leptin, ghrelin, insulin, cortisol. All these hormones, they set our, thermostat of weight. And if that is correctly, we have to correct that thermostat. We have to bring down the reading or the dial. Other than that, just by trying to, open a window or something, it's not going to work at all. So even if you start with, let's say, cutting down your calorie by, let's say, I don't know, 100 calorie, spending 1 hour in the gym, well, you lost some weight, then again you started to regain it. What will you do? You will again cut it down further, like you will reduce it down by, I don't know, another 500 calorie low. You will spend 1 more hour in the gym. You will again lose a little bit, but then again it will get stagnant and will again come back again.
Right.
So it's not going to work. So the theory itself, the calorie in, calorie out, is uh, inaccurate at best, and
Right.
it's incorrect. That's what I think. It's not a working theory. Not just that.
Yeah.
Apart from this, let's talk about maybe the high blood pressure and the salt, right? So in the forest, you will see that animals that travel miles to get to the salt pits and areas with salt. Salt means electrolytes. Our cells, they need
Sodium.
electrolytes to function. So how come salt becomes so dangerous? Uh, it doesn't really make, uh, how to say, any sense to me at all. But then what actually went on inside of us? So now let's say that we are taking a lot of salt. So what will happen? In normal situation, kidney will decide how much salt to retain, and wherever the salt goes, water will also go along with the salt. Now, in our modern exposome, the type of grains and food that we have, they tend to elevate our insulin level chronically for a long time. And for the kidney to decide whether to let the salt go or reabsorb or retain it, it's played, it decided by another hormone called aldosterone. So aldosterone is a hormone that will tell kidney to either to retain or to let go of salt. So just by simply not having salt, you cannot lower your blood pressure as much without damaging other functions of your body. It's better to correct the root cause, that is the aldosterone function. And again, I think aldosterone is again suppressed by insulin. So insulin is not just something that you take for your diabetes. It got so many effects. So insulin, high insulin means it will suppress the activity of aldosterone, and then your kidney won't be able to let go of the sodium. It will retain it. So water will be also retained. So high blood pressure means you have the same volume of your vasculature. Your blood volume is more. That is creating a pressure inside your arteries. So that's one of the reasons. Like, we believe that salt is a bad thing for hypertension, but in reality, sugar might be the real reason for high blood pressure, because sugar will elevate your insulin. Insulin will not let the aldosterone work properly, which will confuse the kidney, that will retain the sodium, that will increase the blood pressure.
Right.
Yeah, so all these theories are something that I learned during the, between 2016 and even today. So I study, I read every day on different aspects of the health. So these theories, these are just theories and myths. Some are useful, some are not so useful, some are completely wrong. Hmm. That's how it is, yeah.
Yeah. No, I kind of tend to agree with you. A simple, I mean, I've also gone through weight loss journeys a few times, right? And I practice a very simple phenomenon, which is getting onto the scale every day morning, right? And I don't get onto the scale to measure my weight every day. I am using that as an input tool as to what happened yesterday. And I've noticed some of these phenomenons where if you had a high sugar diet, so let's say you had a high sugar diet of, say, 200 grams. I'm just making it up, right?
Hmm.
But what you see on the scale the next day is not 200 gram. You see 2 kilograms or 4 pounds or 4.5 pounds. And then you're like, wait a minute, I didn't eat that much. But what's happening on this side? And what is happening on this side is that the body has started retaining a lot of fluids which
Hmm.
it would otherwise dump out as a normal
Yeah,
process.
yeah.
So something must have told the kidney, like, look, dude, something happened, something happened, and it's a dynamic machine which is saying, you know what, this guy did something. I have to retain the fluids so that this thing, and that weight stays elevated.
Yeah.
The other thing I noticed is in the Heald platform itself. I noticed the days I have, call it the bad foods, uh, my glucose readings are shifted up by about 20 basis points
Hmm.
throughout the day for at least 36 hours.
Hmm.
During that 36 hours, if I have actually corrected my eating to a cleaner eating, the same thing which you talked about, nature doesn't present itself with very high carbs and very high fat type
Hmm.
uh, calorie dense stuff, right? There may be nutrient dense stuff, but not calorie dense stuff, right? If I've corrected it, then the glucose level, which, if you take it on a 24-hour window, it'll rebase itself to back to a more basal rate than actually. But if I continue the episode of bad eating, which typically happens when you're going to parties and
Hmm.
the food is normally catered from outside, and that's where the entire supply chain of farm to fork is cannot be controlled, because you that's not done by you, right? So that's done by,
Mm-hmm.
it's perfectly all right. I mean, we're not, to your point about expo zones, we are all obviously, we can't control everything in our
Mm-hmm.
environment. It happens, right? So if I continue to do that episode of bad eating, then the glucose will remain elevated during the day. Although the body may be, I like to call it dry,
Mm-hmm.
meaning I have not given it any additional nutrients, right? But the basal glucose reading is still running high. It has not come back to its sort of predetermined threshold rate, which your biology dictates. So I see some parallels in what you're describing. So that's very, very
Yeah.
insightful. And the last thing, I think this reductionist approach of just looking at, for example, for treatment of diabetes, just looking at insulin is not the most accurate word. I think there was actually a study done, and I can quote the research paper, that they did the study or research with a bunch of mice, and they found out that uh, uh, the hypothalamus, where leptin actually goes and acts, uh, it can also become, the hypothalamus can also become resistant to the amount of satiety
Yeah.
which leptin actually generates. So it does that as well.
Mm-hmm.
That leptin actually goes and acts on the hypothalamus. Sometimes it might require more amount of leptin to say satiety signal. So your point about not being full is also
Yeah. Yeah.
captured there. So that those are very interesting points.